technical difficulties there. But yeah, so instead of streaming from the laptop, I'm back out in the van streaming from the phone. So I'm sure the trolls will start calling in droves soon. Sorry you can't see me much, but whatevs. Yeah, so anyway, I wanted to go through some comment responses today, but unfortunately, that's not going to be an option without the laptop. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is sort of a response to a lot of comments that I've gotten about the daytime full moon thing, right? So basically, and I see people are just popping in, so I'll give y'all a minute to pop in. But basically, the globe Earth model dictates where the so like if you've got a full moon, according to the ball Earth model, that should be on the side of the Earth opposite the sun, according to an observer on Earth, right? And so when you see a full moon during the day, and it's funny because like you look at channels like Lyman Dan, what's my opinion on Zionism? Oh man, that's a whole nother can of worms, isn't it, Sanctus? Um, I think any racism is bullcrap. So, I would put that in the same bucket. Hey, Killer Whale, what's up? Um, so anyway, yeah, in the middle of that thought there, um, the full moon should be on the night side of the Earth, right? And so when we see images or when we see with our own eyes the full moon during the broad daylight, that's a big, big problem for the ball Earth model. And you look at channels like Lyman Dan, he'll do a response to a video that I put out months and months ago that, my video maybe got 10,000 views. And this dude's response to my video gets 100,000 views in a day, right? So, like, how do you compete with that? But it's not only how do you compete with it, but his arguments are of no substance, right? Like, the arguments that he uses are not germane to the point. He uses semantical arguments, and like he'll pick out red herrings of my presentation of the argument and refute the red herring, but do nothing to actually, combat this issue with the ball Earth model, right? And so even if you've seen a full moon during the day once ever, right? It doesn't matter if sometimes the moon kind of aligns to what you would expect in a ball Earth model. If it even once misaligns with the ball Earth model completely, right, 180 degrees, then it's just the ball Earth model falls apart, right? So I was thinking about, because like for some reason people have a hard time getting this point. I don't understand why, because it is so simple. But like put it this way: can you see the sun in the middle of the night, right? Because really, even though the sun is supposedly so much larger than the moon, 400 times further and 400 times larger than the moon, according to the ball Earth model, um, angularly, from an observer's point of view on Earth, they're apparently the same size, right? So seeing the full moon in the middle of the daytime is tantamount to seeing the sun in the middle of the night. It's like the exact same thing, right? You saw my eyes and teeth like a Scooby-Doo episode. I know, right? Sorry, I tried to turn my flashlight on my phone, but it won't do. Hold on, let me try it again. It probably won't let me do it. Um, nope, won't do it. So you're just gonna have to deal with the darkness. But yeah, man, it's frustrating because this is simple geometry. Like, like face forward, right? Can you see what's behind you while you're facing forward? No, because your eyes are on the front of your head, right? So you can't see what's behind your head. Even if you tilt your head up 90 degrees, you still can't see, no matter how hard you try, you can't see what's behind you, right? And so that is a good analogy for the ball Earth model and viewing the moon, full moon during the broad daylight. So like, and I wish, you guys have probably seen my graphics that I've put up many, many times for this. Oh, what's up, Nathan Oakley? Hey, brother. Um, this is now like let's get into the background of this. This piece of evidence with the moon is very similar, or is really sort of piggybacking on what I coined as the Jeranism effect many years ago, which is the fact that visible space should change 180 degrees from winter to summer, according to the Ball Earth model, especially stars that are overhead of the equator, right? So like the North Pole star isn't going to be affected by the alleged action of the Earth around the sun and the Ball Earth theory. However, the equatorial stars should change 180 degrees, like visible space should change 180 degrees from winter to summer because, you're allegedly on the opposite side of the sun, facing in completely opposite directions in space according to that model. And so the fact that we don't have unique equatorial stars relative from winter to summer is very good evidence against the Ball Earth theory. That blows it out of the water. Now, taking that a step further, the phases of the moon are, in my opinion, are a little bit easier to grasp than this because the moon, again, is a perfect indicator of where the moon should be relative to the Earth and the Sun, according to an observer on Earth, and according to the Ball Earth theory. Oh, thanks, Nathan. I appreciate that, brother. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, Nathan Oakley. Support your content producers. Appreciate that, bro. Yeah, so, facing opposite directions in space is one thing, but when you have a very precision indicator, such as the moon, as to where the moon is relative to the Earth and the Sun, according to the Ball Earth theory, that's even better, right? And so again, the full moon should be 180 degrees opposite the sun, and the no lit moon, the no moon or the crescent moons, should be on the day side of the Earth. So, hang on a second, y'all. I'm getting interrupted. Yeah, I'm live streaming.
Come and put it on the computer and get out of the cold.
Oh, no, I gotta finish this. I'm already streaming. Sorry. Yeah. So, right. So, sorry about that. But so, when you have people like Lyman Dan coming out with just ridiculous arguments. So, like, preemptively, what I would say, if I was on the baller side of this argument, what I would argue against the full moon being visible during broad daylight, as it absolutely should never be according to the Ball Earth theory, my argument would be from the other side would be, well, the moon's orbit is 5 degrees offset to the ecliptic plane, which means that it's going to be either north or south of the ecliptic plane, depending on the time of the month, right? However, with the solstices, the tilt of the Earth during the northern summer solstice, maybe if you're close to the northern Arctic Circle, you could get a glimpse of the full moon during the day. But then I would argue it would also be daytime, more than likely, the 24-hour sun in the north. And so that argument really falls apart unless you're very close to the North Pole. And so when I made that video, like, it was a bit of a tongue twister in there. So I was like, the northern summer solstice, but I said, like, quote, the northern summer solstice, right, just as a slip of the tongue. And so Lyman Dan's argument against that point was, so, like, making fun of me getting tripped up with my words in a tongue twister does not debunk this point. Like, this is a really deflective and typical tactic of people like Simon Dan, because really they don't have to do much to make the whole flat earth concept seem stupid to people that are just looking at the topic for the first time. All you have to do is appear to have a valid position, make fun at the silly crazy flat earther, and it's mission accomplished. You don't even have to actually go against the points. I get so many emails and comments referencing me to Lyman Dan's videos, and each one of his videos I watch, I'm like, either this guy is, willfully obtuse, which maybe that's the case, but I don't think so. He's very manipulative, and he takes advantage of people's preconceived notions about the ball Earth, right? So, like, how do you argue with that, man? It's very frustrating because you can't argue against complete illogic and manipulative sort of tactics and taking advantage of this programming that we were all, reared with, the belief in the Ball Earth programming, that is. So, I don't know, man. I've had several people, send me emails and comments trying to understand what this point means because they think they understand it, but they don't really get it. And they'll say things like, "Well, I have seen the full moon at night, so isn't that good enough?" So like the full moon is sometimes where the Ball Earth model says it should be. Well, no, it's not good enough. Because if you see the full moon even once during the day, even once, even if it is near to the horizon or 12 degrees above the horizon, let alone overhead, which, again, I tried to phrase that as best as possible, where sometimes you'll see the full moon rising and setting during broad daylight hours. So it'll go the complete range of overhead during broad daylight. It happens sometimes, not all the time, but it does happen sometimes. And so what people like Sideman Dan will do is he'll just completely blot out the entire portion where the moon is overhead, and he'll just worry about the portions where I said it's either rising or setting during broad daylight, right? And so when the full moon is close to the horizon, there is a little bit of a leeway for the ball Earth argument to where they could say that would work, I guess, but not really. I mean, again, this is tantamount. So, like, let's say the moon's 99% full overhead during the day, that's happened plenty of times in my life. I've seen it with my own eyes, right? If it's 99% full overhead during broad daylight, that's tantamount to seeing the sun in the middle of the night, nowhere near the Arctic Circle, nowhere near the summer solstice, right? And it's the exact same thing. Because again, the full moon should be 180 degrees opposite the sun, or maybe 179.5 if it's 99% full moon, or whatever, right? However, when you see the full moon during broad daylight, it just completely destroys the baller theory. It's simple geometry. It's akin to, again, if you subscribe to the baller theory, seeing the full moon during broad daylight is akin to trying to say that you can see what's behind you while you're facing forward, without using any mirrors or turning your head. It's just an absolutely ridiculous argument. Okay, am I back online? I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on this one here. Excuse me, I'm getting over a bit of a flu and I've still got cracked ribs. What was I freaking saying? But it's just ridiculous, man, because to me it's very obvious that the YouTube algorithm, and this isn't even a secret at all, the YouTube algorithms are designed to prevent good information like this from getting out. It's very simple on their end. They just shadow ban you and take away your subscribers and, make sure your videos don't get pushed to people's notifications. Like, you know how many times I've had to unsubscribe from Sly Sparkane and I still get notifications from that? It's very annoying. And I don't get notifications from most of the channels that I intentionally subscribe to. But then, not only are they shadow banning and dampening videos or points of view that don't go along with the standard mainstream narrative, but then you've also got them propping up and boosting and basically giving an uneven platform to people like Lyman Dan, who he never argues anything of substance. Never makes, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't make any valid debunking points against the videos that he reviews in most cases, although there are some pretty wild and silly flat earth videos out there that he does a pretty good job of debunking, if you will. But when it comes to the actual germane, cogent points that really do make a lot of sense, um, you can't debunk the truth. And so the only thing that they can do, or people like him can do in those sort of situations, is not even try to debunk the truth, right? All they do is basically deflect, make fun, uh, destroy straw man arguments that they sort of couch out of what, like, misconstrue your words and couch in a way so that they debunk straw man red herring arguments. But in terms of actually going against the points or proofs that are being discussed, it never happens. Um, and so again, it's frustrating, but at least there are some people out there that have the critical thinking skills to see the sorts of arguments that the globe earthers are making, realize that they're mostly ad hominems, there's not a whole lot of substance behind them, and it's more along the lines of couching nothing burgers as if they are, the golden truth. And as long as your presentation's good and you seem confident, it's not that difficult because, again, everybody already believes that the Earth is a spinning ball. So, it's not very difficult to make flat earthers seem crazy and stupid. But again, I wish that there was more flat earthers talking about this one particular proof, because it's something that anyone can verify. If you've ever seen even a 90% full moon rising and setting going across your overhead during broad daylight, debunks the ball Earth, unless perhaps you're very close to the North Pole and it's during that solstice, right? So, uh, now the moon, and I've mentioned this in several other videos, but the moon is such an excellent indicator of. But yeah, so the other point that I want to talk about the moon is, again, its shadow during solar eclipses, right? And there is some debate as to whether or not it is actually the moon transiting the sun during solar eclipses, but I would say that it is only necessary to debunk the ball Earth theory in order to make a point. So, assuming the ball Earth theory, assuming that it is indeed the moon transiting the sun during a solar eclipse, the shadow of the moon is usually around 100 miles in diameter or less, sometimes as little as 2 or 3 miles in diameter. And so, for the ball earthers to claim that an object that's, 1,000-mile radius object, 250,000 miles away, casting a shadow that tapers down into a pinpoint, you know, and strikes the Earth as a less than 100 mile diameter shadow, is just absurd, right? Like, you can't demonstrate light and shadows behaving like this anywhere in nature. There's no precedent for it. So, to say that shadows behave conveniently and unnaturally, but only in the cases where it supports the globe, that should tell you something, right? Because I don't give a damn how creative you get with, light sources and obstructing objects. You're never going to create a situation, unless perhaps you're using lenses, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about one light source, one obstructing object. Um, Never in a million years will you create a combination of distances between those objects where the shadow of the obstructing object becomes much, much smaller than the obstructing object. And so for the moon, 1,000-mile diameter or whatever the hell it is, 1,000-mile radius, I always forget, to cast a shadow that's less than 100 miles in diameter is physically not possible. And yet, that is the norm when it comes to solar eclipses. And so that's a big problem. Now, of course, in order to schmooze this over, the Ball Earth team has invented the whole umbra and penumbra thing, where, if you look at diagrams that they come up with, the light from the sun actually intersects with itself at some point in space, and then diverges from that point to create this sort of angular light source, which casts very peculiar and unnatural shadows from the moon to the Earth and from the Earth to the moon, right? That's what they have come up with in order to explain this away. It still doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's their position. It's the umbra penumbra dealio that allows for this, right? But as I've mentioned many times, this is in direct disagreement with Eratosthenes' method of allegedly calculating the circumference of the Earth, right? Because in order for his experiment or demonstration or hypothesis activity to work, in order for that to work, you have to have the light from the sun coming in parallel angles to one another, striking the Earth basically at perfectly parallel angles to one another, right? So again, this contradicts the umbra penumbra situation, where it is necessitated by reality, observable reality necessitates that the light from the sun not be coming in at parallel angles to one another. So basically, one of the cornerstone flagship ancient Greek things that every globetard mentions right off the bat, Eratosthenes, even if they don't know his name or pronounce it correctly, they're going to tell you about Eratosthenes' method. But in the same breath, if you ask them about the shadow of the moon during eclipses, they're going to say that it's the umbra penumbra situation. So there's a huge contradiction here. And, I will mention again, this is a unique situation here, because in most cases, stuff that's going on in the celestial realms, right? So, like the lights in the night sky, we can only observe sort of third hand, or third person. It's not tangible. It's something that we can only observe with our eyes, and there is a lot of distortion between our eyes and the celestial lights, right? I mean, you've got the Earth's magnetic field, you've got ionized plasma, ionized gases up there, and then you've got the atmosphere, just lots of distortion. So our view towards the heavens is not very acute, right? We think that it is, but it's not. However, when it comes to solar eclipses, we can actually measure the shadow of the moon here on the physical plane, on the ground in reality. And the fact that the moon's shadow is very, very tiny relative to what they say the moon is in terms of its actual size, uh, debunks Earth theory. It proves that the moon is much smaller and much closer. And in fact, I would even say, except for the fact that the atmosphere does behave as a lens, so like in a flat Earth sort of situation, it could go either way. But what my point is, though, is whatever the smallest radius of the moon's shadow during a solar eclipse is, should give us a very accurate indication of just how large the moon actually is. So I know there's been a few times in history where the moon's totality shadow was like 2 or 3 miles in diameter. And so what that tells me is that the moon could be as small as 2 or 3 miles in diameter. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, and perhaps the moon isn't even a physical object, right? But the fact that this thing, whatever it is casting shadows that are 2 to 3 miles in diameter, if it is indeed the moon that's transiting the sun during solar eclipses, then, it can't be any uh, bigger than 2 or 3 miles in diameter. It could only potentially be smaller because in normal circumstances, shadows either increase in angular size with distance from the object, or it might stay the same. It might have just zero gain or zero tapering off to a point as well. And so that sounds pretty crazy, man. And I know, if you use Eratosthenes' method, assuming a flat Earth, you get a distance to the moon of about 3,500 miles and a radius of about 30. I'm sorry, a diameter of about 35 miles or so, give or take. However, again, we are viewing the moon through the lens of the atmosphere. Okay, so that's going to do, it could potentially do all sorts of things: refraction and magnification, angular size, apparent enlargement. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. But when it comes to shadows, that's a pretty damn good, yardstick or indicator or metric to go by, seeing how we can actually measure the shadow from the moon on the ground in reality. And so, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, man. I forget the exact dates, but there was one in the 60s, one in the 20s, I think, where the moon shadow was like 2 or 3 miles in diameter during a solar eclipse. A total solar eclipse, no less, not just an annular. Okay? Maybe there was annular involved. I'm not going to swear to that, but it doesn't really matter because, again, play around with a flashlight and a basketball or something for a little while. You'll see what I'm saying. I mean, anybody that's done little shadow puppets on the walls knows what the hell I'm talking about. Shadows get larger with distance. So, these are two huge, huge problems with the ball earth theory that they don't really ever get addressed by the globe earth side, other than excuses and deflecting and, the typical ad hominem. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's crazy talk. The notion that the sun is 90 something million miles away is absurd to me. But of course, that statement right there, my position on that would be very crazy to most people who have done fuck all to inspect what I'm saying, right? Like, don't bother researching or looking into a topic. No, no, just disagree because flat earthers are stupid and crazy, right? I mean, that's the extent of their argument, and clearly it doesn't work for everyone. But I think the social media has been stepping up their game when it comes to suppressing this sort of a position. Not only suppressing our position, but subsidizing the opposing position, which you know it's it's frustrating. But even Google's what is it? What was it? The CEO or the chief technology officer or whatever that chick was. Like they're doing a press conference or something in this bigwig VP at Google, was asked, like, so how are you basically getting rid of conspiracy theorists? Like, if, and this is almost verbatim, so like if someone posts videos about the Earth, press this, and she comes right out and says it. She says more or less that they're going to delist the flat Earth video, so make it so that nobody finds it, and they will also promote opposing views. So I mean, they are saying key phrases, but you know what? I don't care, man. I'm not gonna to jump around the topic and not say what I mean in order to try and get more views, right? I mean, that's ridiculous, and I don't know. Even if I made a video about the latest video games, so yeah, just in recapping this, man, and I'd love to get some. I hate to say debate, but I'd love to get in a conversation with a globetard, even Lieman Dan, about these couple of points. Because I guess I could do response videos to his, but nobody watches mine, and seems like the whole world watches his videos. But I think an honest discussion about this may be able to clear up some things. Well, first, it would clear up, in my personal estimation, as to whether or not Lieman Dan is purposefully, without talking with someone, it's kind of hard to judge that sort of thing. So yeah, like recapping on it, man, the full moon during broad daylight is, or the crescent moon in the middle of the night, is tantamount to seeing the sun in the middle of the night. Okay, it's the same thing, same exact thing, because again, hate to beat a dead horse on this, but it's like, man, I wish I could read through some of the comments that I had planned on reading through with you guys, because like the sorts of rebuttals I get to the impossible moon phenomenon are just mindless. And Simon Dan's video is no exception. Nothing of substance, no geometry to speak of, and that's so typical, right? So you know, I'll keep talking about this point till I die, even if I'm the only one, because it is so simple. I mean, again, it's tantamount to seeing what's behind you while facing forward. It's tantamount to seeing the sun in the middle of the night, and that's exactly the problem with seeing the full moon in the middle of the day or the crescent moon in the middle of the night. Because again, the moon's phase is an excellent indicator of where the moon's position should be according to the ball earth theory. Okay, so I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but you know, oh, is that Boosty Man, Meat Taco Junkie? Make more videos about previous civilizations. Yeah, man, I tried to do the Angkor Wat one, and I asked the people in the chat could they hear me, and a couple people said they could, and so I went on for about an hour, and apparently nobody could hear me. So I'm thinking of redoing that one, but excuse me, the situation is it's a difficult situation to do. I'm a little bit out of my element, a little bit out of my, and of course I keep on losing streams. So look, y'all, I promise the next stream will be better. I had some diagrams and some pictures that I wanted to show you, but I was having some trouble with my laptop, if you know what I mean. So this was the best that I could do. But hey, man, are there any questions about this topic in the chat right now? I know there's not too many of you guys, but does anybody like having trouble understanding this, or myself clear on this point? Because I mean, I've done probably a dozen videos on this point, um, but it just seems like it's not catching on as it should, because it is such a blatant problem with the ball earth model. I mean, it really is. And I think it's a very powerful, because like I don't know, I grew up, we've all seen the full moon during the day. I was told that it was good luck according to some cultures. I don't know if that's true, but that's where if you just sort of sit down and diagram it out. And, the point I was trying to make about the 5-degree offset of the moon's alleged orbital path to the ecliptic plane really doesn't affect this at all. Again, unless you're very close to the Arctic Circle during the solstice, that might come into play. But then again, you would also be able to see the sun. So it would be daylight. Even if it was midnight in the Arctic Circle during the northern summer solstice, it's going to be daylight. So perhaps, yes, perhaps then you could see the crescent moon or no, I'm sorry, the full moon in broad daylight, right? You'd be able to see the sun and the moon, the full moon in the same sky from the northern Arctic Circle during the northern summer solstice. because nobody knows what a solstice is. A northern summer solstice, not stolstice, right? Lyman Dan. I mean, can you believe the just elementary nature of that argument? Like, doesn't even respond to the point. I mean, I was trying to give the Globetards one on that, but it doesn't solve it. If you just diagram this out, you'll see. Just kind of hip pocket calculations. If the moon is at its apex of its divergence from the ecliptic plane, so if it's at the 5-degree max divergence, that's going to place it something like 15 or 20,000 miles north of the ecliptic plane, a 250,000 miles away. So again, if you're standing on the opposite side of the Earth and you're basically a microscopic little speck of dust on the dark side of the Earth, or the day side of the Earth, whichever, you're not going to be able to see what's underneath your feet a 250,000 miles away. So yeah, I keep on losing my stream every time I try to relax my arms, so it's kind of frustrating. But so Mark of Melbourne says, "Is the moon sea transparent, or are you just seeing the blue of the sky in the dark parts?" Yeah, like that was one of the things that was popularized by Eric Dubay. The moon during the day appears to be transparent, but in my opinion, and of course I've been to the moon, so I can't say this for sure, but it makes a lot of sense to me that the moon is not actually transparent, and what you're seeing the dense blue atmosphere reflecting back at you. So like the lighter, brighter parts of the moon are higher gain light than the darker parts of the moon. And so in those darker crater parts, it appears that you can see blue sky through them. But again, it's just because that high gain light is not breaking through the reflective blueness of the atmosphere, if that makes sense. That's my belief on it. And it's not just it's an educated guess. It's not. I'm just not just shooting in the dark to disagree with Eric Dubay on this. I really do think that that's a ridiculous comment to say that the moon is transparent. Um, but maybe I'm wrong. There have been claims that you can sometimes see stars through the moon, and that may indicate some transparency of it. But again, I'm not even 100% convinced that the moon is indeed a physical object. Um, one thing that's sort of carried over with me from conventional physics and theoretical physics is the idea of higher dimensions, right? So I'm a big believer that the next dimension, so the fourth dimension, would be time. Makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. However, two objects can indeed occupy the same space at different times, right? So that adds an extra dimension to it. Now, when you're talking of higher dimensions than that, if there even is such a thing, then we as three-dimensional creatures could never even conceptualize what a fifth dimensional object is. It is not in our nature to be able to conceptualize it, and perhaps we could see traces or shadows or reflections of fifth dimensional objects, but we will never fully grasp what they are. And so, in that sort of a sense, perhaps the sun and the moon are symptoms or shadows of higher dimensional objects that we cannot wrap our brains around. And so, the analogy that I really love to use to drive this point home is borrowed from good old Carl Sagan from Cosmos, right? You guys remember the flatland, the flatland analogy that Carl Sagan used in Cosmos? So basically, if you got a sheet of paper and you put a point on that sheet of paper, that would be a one-dimensional indicator. So the point is one dimension. If you draw a line between 2 points, that would be 2 dimensions. And if you draw, up, down, and 3 different directions, well, actually, no. Yeah, I'm sorry. 2 dimensions, that's all you can get on a flat piece of paper is 2 dimensions, right? And so the people that live in flatland, so the people that live in this 2-dimensional space, right, they can only perceive the edges of lines. So like for example, a 1-inch diameter circle would appear exactly the same as a 1-inch diameter square, according to someone who lives inside of 2-dimensional flatland. And if a 3-dimensional object were to pass through this sheet of paper, like say an apple, they would see a series of lines that would start out as 4 little lines and then would increase in size as the apple passes through flatland, but they would never be able to conceptualize what the apple was, right? It would just appear as, it would render in the 2-dimensional from their point of view as two-dimensional, right? Because they are incapable of perceiving three dimensions, okay, in flatland. And I know I just butchered the crap out of this analogy, but if you can sort of grasp what Carl Sagan was saying with this analogy, then apply that to us in the third dimension. So we can kind of understand what time is. We can experience time, and we are sort of subjects to time, right? We are slaves to time. We can't manipulate time. We can't control time, right? We ride along with time, basically, and it's very difficult to define exactly what time is, because again, according to me, time is the fourth dimension. Now when you get into higher dimensions than that, theoretically, right, all bets are off. I mean, we have no possible capability of conceptualizing what these higher dimensions would be, right, down, and not the moon being transparent. But again, I would not even feel safe claiming that the moon is a physical object, or at least a three-dimensional physical object, right? So, yeah. So, any more questions about? Again, in flatland, they would only see the cross section of the object portion that was passing through their plane, right? But they would never conceptualize what that third-dimensional object is. They would only be able to see traces or, like shadows of what that object was. So Illidian Storm Rage says, other thing to point out is the Bible, which claims the two luminaries of these lands to go in and out through portals. Now, this have to be proven to be solid, but so far the Bible is very accurate. And I think it was more extra biblical, wasn't it? The Book of Enoch, where Enoch claims to have seen all of the workings of the solar system, or whatever, the mechanisms of how the Earth works. And yeah, indeed, that's what was claimed. Although, again, honestly, guys, I would be very surprised if we ever have the capability of fully understanding how the sun and moon work or what they are. But what we can definitely do is debunk the ball Earth theory with them by something as simple as, again, the moon's position. Right? So, I think that one thing I will say, not to be a stick in the mud, Storm Rage, but honestly, man, the Bible was never written to either prove or disprove flat Earth or the workings of the celestial lights, because, frankly, it appears that when the Bible was written, excuse me, everyone already knew the Earth was flat, right? In fact, it doesn't appear that anyone had ever even postulated the ball Earth theory during biblical times, and so the concept of the Bible even attempting to prove flat Earth is, to me, is a little silly. However, indeed, yes, indeed, the Bible and extra biblical texts like Enoch are definitely flat Earth geocentric books, right? And so, that's a big thing, man, because I remember when I was younger, I was taught about the science and the ball Earth theory and heliocentrism very young. And I was also forced to go to church and be an altar boy for many years when I was very young. Um, and how do you reconcile that? Because, we're taught by our parents and in school that the Earth's a spinning ball in outer space, and yet, basically, in the very beginning of the Bible, it says that God created the Earth fixed and immovable, right? So, how can you have a fixed and immovable spinning ball that's flying around in 5 different directions at once, going ultimately millions of miles an hour with the galaxy around the sun as well? I mean, it's just there's a big contradiction there, and most people in this modern age are going to choose science over the religion, right? And so, at a very young age, I made a conscious decision that the Bible was a lot of fairy tales, because, I was led to believe by science with a capital S that the Earth is a spinning ball. And so, clearly, if the Bible's wrong on basically page 1 about the Earth being fixed and immovable, then you can pretty much throw the rest of it out the window. And that really is, in my opinion, one of the biggest motivating factors for the ball Earth lie. It was not just to discredit the Bible, because keep in mind, the Judeo-Christian Bible is certainly not the only ancient text and religion which had a geocentric flat Earth cosmology. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Every last one of the ancient, call them religions or texts or cultures, had geocentric flat Earth cosmologies. This is the Vedics, the Indians, the Chinese, the Norse, the Greeks, the Egyptians. I mean, it is pretty much even all the way to the Maya. All of these ancient cultures had flat Earth, fixed and immovable cosmologies, geocentric flat Earth cosmologies. And so when science with a capital S comes along and convinces every generation of toddler that the Earth is a spinning ball in outer space, flying around in multiple directions at once, then it really does it knocks the hell out of pretty much all ancient cultures, casting them in such a light as they were very stupid and these gullible people thought the Earth was flat and stationary, right? And so let's not forget that it's not just Christianity that the heliocentric model is taking jabs at, right? So yeah, good point there, Illidan. Sorry if I'm butchering your name there, brother man, but Illidan Storm Rage. Mark of Melbourne, but time can be manipulated in synchronicity. Well, I'm not sure I follow, because the last I checked, the second hand on a clock is going to keep going. Even if you take the battery out, the seconds still keep going. So the clock is not a clock is not controlling time. The clocks are riding along with time like everybody else. Don't even relax my arm without the stream dying. I'm sorry, y'all. So yeah, so maybe I'll see another one from Mark of Melbourne, maybe elaborating on that a little bit, because I'm not sure I follow. Time is a construct in your head to measure memories and illusions from your present moment. Time is not a cause nor effect, neither tangible. Right, but Illidan Storm Rage, what about the point that I made to begin with, man? X cannot occupy the same space at the same time, right? But two objects can indeed occupy the same exact space at two different times. So in my estimation, in my opinion, that is the definition of another dimension, right? But yeah, it is. I mean, I agree that the concept of time, or the hour day, if you will, are a construct in our head. But there is something physical and tangible about what I just mentioned. Again, you can't have two objects, same space, same time, but you can have those same exact two objects in the same exact space at two different times. So in that respect, there is something tangible about time. It creates another dimension to things, if you will. But in terms of being able to travel back in time, or, I mean, I guess traveling forward in time is, that's more of a subjective thing, but I don't think that, backwards time travel is ever going to be possible. It's just, uh, things that have happened are not going to, you can't go back and revisit them. So maybe we'll have to agree to disagree on that little aspect of it, but I do agree that in many ways the concept of time is a human construct. But there is some physical reality to it, as I've mentioned a couple times here. Yeah, in Deep Enoch. Yeah, and plugging Zen Garcia's book, man, he wrote a really good book called Flat Earth is the Key to Unlocking the Book of Enoch, and basically in a nutshell, scholars and Christian scholars over the years studying the Book of Enoch have basically had to write it off as the musings of a fantastical madman. But from a flat Earth sort of geocentric cosmology standpoint, everything that Enoch was saying made a whole lot more sense, right? So yeah, there's that. Enoch saw aliens. Well, brother man, Orlando, I have been a big fan of aliens my whole life, and I hate to say it, but if there are some other beings visiting us here, which may be true, they are not coming from other planets. They're coming from elsewhere along this physical dielectric plane of inertia of reality, the physical plane. So they could be coming from subterranean, or underwater, or they could be coming from uh, areas far along the plane that we haven't even explored yet in terms of our society is aware of, right? Because there is definitely way more land out there than we've been led to believe. That's one of the other huge motivating factors for the Ball Earth Lie, in my opinion, is to create the illusion of scarcity, so that robber barons and good capitalists can take advantage of price gouging, right? Because when there's plenty of a thing, like say corn, right, then corn is cheap. if there's plenty of oil and gasoline, as much as we don't need it, in lieu of free energy type of fuel sources, the more gas there is, the less expensive it becomes. It's the whole supply and demand thing. And so creating a hypothetical finite ball out of what appears to be potentially an infinite physical plane creates this illusion of scarcity, right? And so it basically puts us all in a finite, enclosed system that can never be escaped, a prison for our minds, and it makes it so that, non-renewable resources ain't never coming back, and there's no more frontiers to be had. There's no more pioneering beyond what we already know on this ball. And so, it really does appear to me that the whole idea, the one of the big motivating factors, besides, putting a stake in the heart of all ancient cultures' belief systems or knowledge, if you will, but it also puts us on a finite, enclosed system, a prison for our minds that they can use to create the illusion of scarcity in, commodities in order to price gouge, right? So there is that. It's like insider trading at its worst, right? Like, wow, if Martha Stewart went to jail for all those years for insider trading, imagine what frickin' Copernicus and Newton would have to sit through. So, Elydian Storm Rage, I do have some background in Morgile. Many of us come from the same road. Yeah, man. Casey Joel says, if you experience synchronicities, you would swear something is messing with time. Or okay, so synchronicity. So we're talking about like deja vu. Well, um, here's the thing. This is the way that I've heard it put, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Because I know some people that they have premonitions, and those premonitions often come true, and I've had them myself, and I've had deja vu's as well. Um, but so okay, things that have happened in the past have already happened, and our brain, our little meat tuner device, our radio frequency meat tuner in our head, right? It remembers things that have already happened. That makes a lot of sense because we've already done them and we can remember them. Now, this RF frequency meat tuner called our brain, according to some, can also, if you will, remember things that have not yet come to pass, right? And, and so basically, when you have deja vu, again, we are beings of energy and frequency, right? That's what we are, right down to the so-called molecular level. We are energy, right? Everything is made up of energy, and so and of course our minds are hands down by recent advances in neuroscience and imaging the synapses and messing around with the radio frequencies that go into our brains. I mean, if you look at some of these Google videos or YouTube videos of neuroscience and basically tapping into the human brain with RF frequencies, it's pretty wild, man, because our brains are definitely, RF frequency tuners, man. It's just like changing the station on a stereo, on the radio. Um, and so the idea of synchronicities, I get that, but I wouldn't necessarily say that is time being, broken or hacked or cracked. I would just say that that's more along the lines of us remembering things that have not yet happened because, again, our mind, ourselves, will be ourselves until the day that we die. And so, in some respects, it makes a lot of sense to me that we could be attuned to things that have not yet happened, much like we remember things that have already. Can apparently turn this sort of, future seeing on and off, which definitely, I'm definitely not going to poo-poo it, right? So yeah, synchronicities. So yeah, now I know what you meant by synchronicities. Got it. So City L. Karki says, what do you think the connection of the moon and the sun is? Could the moon be a projection of the sun? I think that because of the opposite light temperatures. Thanks. Um, you know, I don't know, man. It really is a lot of speculation. I'm still of the mindset that the moon's phases could be caused by the reflection of sunlight, and I know that puts me as sort of a black sheep or pariah in this community, but I don't think that it's that big of an issue because we're too first of all we're too used to considering the moon's phases in a ball Earth sort of model, but in the flat Earth model, the only thing that has to do in order to work is the relative altitudes. If the sun and the moon are physical objects, the relative altitudes of the two will sort of phase in and out over the course of a month, right? So during the no moon cycle, the moon would physically be positioned lower than the sun, and during the full moon cycle, the moon would be physically positioned higher than the sun, right? And so I know that's very very simplified explanation of it, but at the end of the day, perhaps these aren't even physical objects. Now, do I think that there is some connection between the moon and the sun? I think that that is very, very possible. I definitely do. I mean, just look at things like eclipses again. These two things are during total solar eclipses. The sun and the moon are perfectly matched. Now, of course, you do have the annular eclipses where when the moon transits the sun, instead of totally covering the sun, you'll have a ring of sun around the obstructing moon. That's your annular eclipse. And so what that tells me is at least the apparent angular sizes of the sun and the moon are changing from time to time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have solar and annular eclipses. They would always be the same if the distance betwixt the two wasn't if the distance betwixt the two was static, right? And so, I mean, I definitely think there's a possibility between the sun and the moon being two sides of the same coin. Yes, indeed, sunlight is preservative and it is warm, clearly. Moonlight is, it'll rot things, so it's the opposite of preservative, and it is indeed a cold light. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the old yin and yang thing, right? And yeah, I think that there may be something to that. But in terms of actually ever proving that conclusively with physical experiment, I don't think it'll ever happen, man. I don't. Every 19 days is a full moon. Um, every 19 days, huh? Well, doesn't the cycle of the moon take about 27 and a half days? The tool can be manipulated. Time is a measurement, same as money and non-tangible. Well, again, I would revert back to the thing that I said before. You can't put two pool balls in the same spot on the pool table. You can maybe stack them on top of one another for a second, but not in the same space at the same time. But at different times, you could do it all day long. You could put 10 different pool balls in the same space at different times. So there is some tangible dimensional element there. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? So I don't know. So Mark in Melbourne says, no, I'm saying when synchronistic events happen in your life that were meant to be time events being manipulated by God. Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. Um, but I think I sort of already covered that. I know I'm way slower than you guys are. I'm like way behind on the comments. So Casey Joel says, as I've been following your vids, I've suspected you to be targeted because of how you think and your ability to present your arguments. Yeah, oh yeah, I was targeted for sure, man. Absolutely. They did a number on me, bro. They sure did. But whatever. What can you do, man? DJ Zoid says they come from France. So Storm Race, there's a physical world which time is not part of it. Where it fits is in the mind, while the digital world can take more priority, but still not physical. Even if you're, well, we'll hold that thought. But yeah. Oh, and I guess I should take this second to plug the Zetetic News Network. If you guys haven't gone over there and subscribed, I put the last video that I put up with the ZNN logo on the cover was their climatatrophizing live stream that they did last week. The one that they did before that, they covered some really interesting things about virtual reality and where that sort of thing is going and where they want us to go. And it really is. It's almost like a stepping stone to literally the Matrix, where we're all pooping into vats of pink goo. You know, I'm not going to get nasty with it, but that's where they want us to go. So anyway, check out Zetetic News Network because those guys are on point, funny as hell, very intelligent intellectuals, and I'm going to be doing some work with them in the future. So, but I would appreciate it if you guys are interested in that sort of Zetetic stuff. They don't just talk flat Earth; they talk other things. Check their channel out. Again, it's Zetetic News Network. I've got a link to their channel in the video of theirs that I reposted the other day, and they go real deep into the VR thing, and it's kind of scary, man. Like the way where things are going with virtual reality. But yeah, that's where they want us. They want us all in little basically little 6x9 cells strapped to virtual reality machines on our heads, pissing into colostomy bags for the convenience of it, getting our food through IV injections, right? Nourishment. So, Meat Taco Junkie says maybe remnants of the pre-existing civilizations that had tech, and that's what Enoch saw. Well, yeah, man, the ancient civilizations absolutely 100% had technology that we do not give them credit for. I was watching a little documentary the other day, and they were showing these pyramids that were built. I forget exactly where it was. It wasn't Egypt pyramids, but just great, just beautiful pyramids that were technological marvels. And the narrator had the audacity to say that the people that built that pyramid didn't even know what a wheel was. Didn't even know what the hell a fucking wheel was, right? And that's the conventional mainstream narrative, is that, these ancient civilizations, man, they could build things like Angkor Wat in Cambodia. They could build things like the Mayan temples. They could build things like the Egyptian pyramids. But they didn't have even wheels. Didn't even have a wheel. I mean, dude, that is absurd. But that's like, that's the level of idiocracy that we're at with the mainstream narrative. I mean, even just the slightest little bit of inspection into the mainstream narrative topics shows that they're just ridiculously got their head so far up their asses. The little lump in their throat is their fucking nose, right? So anyway, who turned the lights out? I'm sitting in my van, and it's like foggy, and I didn't bring my. No, I'm sitting outside in my van. I didn't forget to pay the electric bill. Goodness gracious. Okay, so True Teller says, I agree the stinking meth head is a waste of skin. He should F off ASAP. Well, isn't that sweet of you, bro? Thanks for the comment. I love it when I get comments from people that love me too. Okay, Meat Taco Junkie says Mandela effect. Well, okay. So here's the thing about that, man. I think that there's some of them. Yeah, there's definitely some of the so-called Mandela effects that have left me scratching my head. But I think at the end of the day, people have way shittier memories than they believe that they do, right? So, maybe I'm wrong about this, and I'm sure I'm going to hurt a lot of feelings. But starting with Mandela, I remember him getting locked up, getting put in prison, all the celebrities trying to get him out, and finally he got out. And I followed that pretty closely. I wasn't just like passively, it was going in one ear and out the other on the news. Like I was interested in Mandela, and I was paying attention, and so were a lot of people I know. And yeah, the dude didn't die in the 80s or 90s or whatever. He was put in prison, and there was a whole big celebrity campaign to get him out. So, starting with the very first one, the namesake of the Mandela effect, to me is like, wow, people have really bad memories and they think that they know a whole lot more shit than they actually do. Now, one of the ones that really got me was the Luke, I am your father from Star Wars, okay? The Empire Strikes Back, or whichever one it was. Because I'm pretty damn sure that he said, Luke, I'm your father. However, in the context of the conversation, he's sitting there talking to Luke, and he says, no, I'm your father. Now, I don't know. I can't swear to that, but maybe we just heard it wrong. Maybe, yeah, I know that seems pretty crazy because Luke, I'm your father is pretty much solidified in our minds, from the hundreds of times that we've all seen Empire Strikes Back or whichever one it was, right? But then you've got other ones like the Berenstein Bears, and I remember the spelling being wrong when I was a youngin'. It was always spelled like that. Even the people that wrote the book spelled Berenstein like that. So man, I don't know, bro. It's like, don't you think that if they were going back in time changing things, they would go for a little bit more of the gusto than lines from movies? Um, I don't know. I heard one the other day that I'm like, man, I'm pretty sure that changed though. You guys remember Bone Thugs and Harmony? Um, in one of those songs. Oh yeah, in the first of the month song, um, I think it's Busy Bones says in one of the lines he says, "Gonna get a bag." Wait, what did he say? Gonna get a bag of Coke and a quarter O or something about yayo, and it's done changed. Like I don't know, all y'all Bone Thugs and Harmony fans out there, go back and listen to the first of the month song again and tell me if you think that line changed. You might have to listen to it twice because they're pretty fast. But yeah, I don't know about the Mandela effect, man. I just think that people are, first of all, our memories are not as good as we think that they are, and we are also very suggestible. So if you go and tell 100 people that lived through Mandela being imprisoned and the celebrity campaign to get him out, but they weren't really paying attention to it, they just kind of passively, heard some information about Mandela. If you go and tell them, well, hey man, I'm 100% sure that he died in the 90s and now he's alive and they're letting him out of prison, right? Well, if you are sure of your position, even if you're wrong, you're going to sway people to believe that because you know people are not going to remember that if they weren't paying attention and just sort of passively absorbing the information in one ear and out the other. You're gonna create a lot of false information in their thought process by inserting things that you believe into what they don't remember, and next thing you know, you have a Mandela effect. That's what I think that it is, if that makes any sense. I know it's sort of a ramble, but it's just a lack of memory on most people's parts, but also a confidence in our memory that is misplaced, as well as the suggestibility of others who are really the generators of these Mandela effects, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are going back in time somehow and changing the lines of Star Wars movies and Bone Thugs and Harmony songs. Hey, buddy Blindy, what's up, buddy? I love going on little 10-second deja vu trips. Yeah, it is pretty wild, man. I mean, I've had a few of them in my time where yeah, it's pretty uncanny, but yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but I don't know, like are they changing things in the Matrix? Was it the same cat or did it just look like the same cat, right? Or was it Tennessee? Sipping on that Hennessy. All right. So Casey Joel says, not deja vu, timing of events that happen that have distinct, profound meaning to you, but not really anyone else. Like Carl Jung with the scarab beetle. Yeah, I mean, okay, but that means something to you and nobody else. So it's a subjective thing. I mean, again, we are very abstract, energy-minded beings, and so things, something that could have a profound effect on one individual might mean nothing to anyone else. But I don't think that that is necessarily any indicator of, you know, time travel or time as being physical, tangible, higher dimension, right? Make time part of reality. Time is one of many controls over you. It keeps you compliant. But the sun comes up and the sun sets, the moon rises and the moon sets. So there is time in that respect because otherwise, if there wasn't time, then the moon and the sun would always be in the same place at the same, or at the same place. They wouldn't move. So there is time is going to flow whether people are here to observe it or not, right? So whether people are here to observe time or mess around with things in time, you're still not going to be able to put two objects in the same place at the same time, right? So I agree that there is a subjective element to time itself, a human construct, subjective element. But again, there is a physical, tangible, dimensional reality to this that us being third dimensional beings bound in the third dimension, then time is higher dimensional than us, I believe, and so it is beyond our capacity to fully grasp or manipulate time. Okay, that's all I'm saying. G Monk says size, direction, and who really knows if the rotations. Hmm. No, not all nighter. I'm getting ready to get up actually. G Monk 03, the sun is certainly higher. I'm not sure. Casey Joel says, Storm Rage, have you read the Nag Hammadi scriptures? And if so, do you think it's related to what uses time to manipulate our perceptions? Is that like the tablets of Thoth or something? I don't know. Ready Player One. Yeah, that's that Steven Spielberg movie where basically, and Zach and Dave do talk about that on one of their previous CNN podcasts. Ready Player One is basically showing us what they want to do with our future. They want to strap everybody into VR and have us pissing into buckets in our little 6x9 cells. That's their goal, and they're halfway there, man. They really are. I mean, they're 90% there. they've got people begging for VR, man. And, the state of this sick-ass, sad world, I can't say that I blame people for wanting to just bug out in their little mind space, right? But I disagree with it. I think it's crazy. I don't know if I'd want to get into virtual reality, man. From what I hear, like, people that sit there and binge on VR games, man, when they come out of it, they're all depressed and the real world doesn't seem real, and like they can't sleep and they get no fulfillment out of the things that used to make them happy. So I don't know, man, but I think it might be fun to just fuck off with for a little while, right? I don't know. I'm a bad influence though. So Gmonko3 says I have difficulty believing in interpointed dimensions because I believe dimensions are polar like magnetics. It's either there or not. Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a lot of me that feels the same way about sort of higher dimensional theory because it is conventional physics, theoretical conventional physics. However, when you bring time into the analogy, man, I think time is the perfect example of a fourth dimension that we operate within. We can sort of perceive it, we can keep track of it, but we can't manipulate it, and we can't. We're stuck in time, right? I don't know. That's a bad way to put it, but yeah. Mark Melbourne says, I find it funny how they invented the speed of light based on the Cartesian coordinates of the Great Pyramid after Descartes. Well, a couple of years ago, man, I did a video on speed of light, and how they came to the figures that they have for the speed of light. And man, is it a steaming pile of pseudoscience and just complete nonsense conjecture, theoretical, and devices that they use to calculate the speed of light is just absurd. If you search my channel, search my videos for speed of light, you'll find it. It's a couple years ago. But basically, um, what they did was, it's so funny. This guy, who he was like this ancient, and I say ancient loosely, this French dude, first estimated the speed of light based on like the transit of the moons of Jupiter. And even though he didn't even think that he knew the distance to Jupiter, he estimated it, and it happened to be correct, verified years and years later by globetards, right? We know how the globetards do. They do science by numbers, right? Like color by numbers, but it's science. And so they conform to what his estimation was. But again, so he took the transit of the moons of Jupiter and somehow estimated the speed of light based on that, even though he didn't know the distance to the sun and he didn't know the distance to Jupiter. He just estimated, and it turns out he was right in his wild fucking guess, if you can believe that. Then to verify those numbers, you had people like, I think Foucault, famous for his retarded ass pendulum. Foucault comes in years later and takes, it's like a rotating mirror. He shines a light over 8 kilometers to hit this rotating mirror before the light bulb was even invented, and then is able to basically triangulate on how much the light bounces off the mirror as it's spinning. It's kind of hard to explain, but watch my video about the speed of light and you'll get it. It is a pile of conjecture. And then nowadays, college level students, physics students, they'll recreate these experiments, but with much better equipment, mirrors that rotate much faster, laser beams, light bulbs, and they'll get wildly varying numbers to what people like Foucault got. And when that happens, what they'll do is they'll say, oh, well, we must have botched the experiment. We'll have to do it again because this is bad data, right? So basically, again, it's science by numbers. If they don't get results that agree with the godfathers of physics who cannot be questioned, then they redo the experiment until they get numbers that are basically aligned with what people like Foucault and whatever those other fuckers were. So the speed of light is just absolutely nonsense, man. And I probably did a terrible job of explaining why I've come to that conclusion, but just watch my video about the speed of light and you'll get it. It probably wasn't even a couple years ago, maybe a year ago. The Meat Taco Junkie says, man, the ancients had flying cars that ran on water. Water, man. Well, maybe they did. One of the primary elements of water is hydrogen. Hydrogen is highly combustible, so you can definitely explode hydrogen if you can somehow get that vaporite through the carburetor system, through the fuel line, whatever. So Storm Rage again says, Morgile, there are pyramids all over you, under the sea, in Antarctica, underground, and so on. Calling it a civilization issue is ignoring all the other data. Yeah, no, this was a worldwide phenomenon, man. It definitely was. And, look at, I think one of the big indicators is look at China. China has hundreds and hundreds of pyramids everywhere. And, again, what the Chinese government did was they buried them under trees and bushes and stuff. So they look like mountains. But indeed, they are pyramids all over China, right? And we don't learn about that in school. You have to learn about it on Ancient Aliens, because we all know that aliens built the Chinese pyramids too, right? Hey, what's up, Andres, buddy? Hey, man. Dan the Waterman, what's up, brother, man? How you been, bro? What about the Houston we have a problem one? Yeah, Houston's got all kinds of problems. Houston's a fucking liar. I'm just going to come out and say it. Bubbly Blindy says, it's another tool constructed as a psyop. Yeah. Oh, hey, Karen B. What's up? What's up? Reality shift is a much better description for what people call the Mandela effect. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and I guess I'm pretty jaded. I think it's those combination of things. People have crappy memories. They think their memories are much better than they actually are, and we're subjectable about the things that we don't remember right. So that's a witch's concoction of, Mandela effectism. I mean, it could happen. Let's put it this way. That makes a lot more sense to me, what I just described. That seems a lot more sensible than, oh, well, they're firing up CERN and changing things in the past. I mean, and maybe that's not what you believe, but as far as I'm concerned, CERN is just another NASA. It's a money pit. It's a place to pigeonhole our brightest minds into looking at data that's spit out of a multi-billion-dollar lie factory. That's all that it is, in my opinion. Because, I mean, I totally disagree with the whole atomic theory and the Big Bang theory anyways. And so with CERN, they're trying to find that God particle, and even one of their own stated agendas is to create conditions similar to what the universe would have been like moments after the Big Bang. Okay? So I don't care how many billions of dollars you spend on lie factories at CERN, right? You're never going to create conditions like the Big Bang or moments after the Big Bang, because the Big Bang never happened, right? So in that respect, I think that CERN is just another money pit and pigeonholing for researchers and scientists, just like NASA is. So Casey Joel says, unless those changes were made as experimental changes to see what the effects of minor changes are, could just be mass memory issue. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, man. It's a very alluring topic. I think Mandela effect topic is very interesting, and there have been a few that have left me, scratching my head, man. But again, it just seems to me, because there are several of them that I remember perfectly, because those are the ones that I was paying attention to. Like, I remember when I was a kid, man, thinking that, oh, it's not Berenstein Bears, it's Berenstain Bears. Everybody's saying it wrong. But, of course, you've got the whole Frankenstein and Einstein and Frankenstein. I get it why people would misremember something like that. But, I mean, I paid attention to that when I was a little jitterbug, and I remember it perfectly. It was never, so I don't know. G-Monk says, I remember the liberals being spelled liberals, and I've been into politics for most of my life. I know they change spellings all the time with no notice. I mean, I don't know, man. I disagree. I remember the first one, liberals, always and forever. But, yeah, and I'm kind of I don't know. I really love grammar. I love spelling. And I know for a fact that liberals was never spelled liberals. And I'm not just disagreeing with you to be a butthead, I'm telling you. But see, if you told that to 100 people, you'd have 50 of them at least saying, oh my God, liberals was Mandela affected. I remember it too. It was liberals. Because people are suggestible, and especially if you ain't good at spelling shit, then you're going to, you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I would rather check the Schumann resonances. Sure. The lion shall lay down with the lamb. Yeah, okay, so there's one, man. That is a little bit creepy. I gotta admit, there are some of them that I'm like, well, and see, here's the thing, though. I've heard the Elvis song, The Lion Should Lay Down with the Lamb, But I'll be honest with you, I've never sat there and read through the Bible and read it saying wolf lay down with the lamb until after the Mandela effect brought it up. So is Elvis the cause of this Mandela effect because of that song? Lion should lay down, right? With the lamb. My Elvis sucks. I know. How could everyone be remembering the same thing or having the same false memory? Well, it's like I said, um, it's suggestibility. I think. Now, okay, so we'll go back to the Luke, I'm your father. Um, I remember audio things. I have a good ear for things. You know what I mean? And I do remember him saying, "Luke, I'm your father." So when he says, "No, I'm your father," that was a pretty big one for me because I am a very auditory type of person, and it's weird, man. Yeah. So why would everybody have the same false memory? Yeah, I don't know. Some of them I just can't reconcile. Other than, well, we all must have heard it wrong. And maybe I'm wrong, man. Maybe I'm wrong. But that makes sense. That makes more sense to me that we sort of heard it wrong. We assumed that he said Luke because he's talking to Luke. And then everybody for the last 20 years has said, Luke, I'm your father. Right? And so that's what got drilled into our heads. Although, yeah, I don't know. Yep, yep. No time travel. Yeah, I agree, Karen B. Hey, girl. It's three different cats. Yeah. Yep. So wow, we've been going for an hour and 20. Any other? Well, let me go down through the comments. I was hoping to get questions about the impossible moon at night portion of this, as well as the shadow of the moon during eclipses portion, because these are two big ass points that hardly anybody ever mentions, and I think that is a really good piece of ammunition for the arsenal. The more, the better. But when you have people that are combating these sorts of proofs and arguments with just absolute nonsense, conjecture, ad hominem, and poking fun, it is a little bit frustrating and difficult. Did I hear, Boosty Man, did I hear about Elon Musk Neuralink? That sounds interesting, like your VR concept. Yeah, I mean they're gonna get better and better, smaller and smaller, and to the point where eventually they're just gonna put a computer chip inside your brain, man. And at that point, I'm done with video games. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to play a game, but when you actually start inserting hardware into your cranium, that's a bit scary for my taste. I'm just saying. Dolly had braces in Moonraker, not anymore. I saw that one. I disagree. I remember that movie when I was young. She had those big, glasses. She was wearing eyeglasses, but she didn't have braces, man. It was. I disagree. I remember that movie very well. And you know, the other one, like the Monopoly Man, right? Dude, he never had a monocle. I remember because I used to love Monopoly when I was young, and I remember looking at that box all the time. He's winking. He's got a top hat, and you assume a monocle because the one of the cards in the Monopoly game, the guy has a monocle in the card, right? But not on the game cover. If I've got that right, maybe I'm fucking wrong, but I know that the guy on the cover never had a monocle. I believe one of the like community chest cards or whatever, the dude's sporting a monocle. Maybe I don't know. Casey Joel says, when people like you or John start going off the rails of normal frequencies, you light up on the grid and gain attention, especially when your dot starts making other dots going off the rails. Yeah. Well, that's sort of my mission, man, because when you grow up in the Matrix and you realize what it is, you realize the deception and the control and the slavery. We have a moral imperative to pop off with this shit, man. And who cares who doesn't like it? Even if one person out of 100 gets it or hears the message, then that's cool. Quantum computers are probably monitoring everyone by now. Who knows? And I wonder about that, man. So, like these quantum computers, these AIs, if they are self-learning, are they even capable of learning empathy and right and wrong, or were they just programmed by their creators to be just totally evil and censoring and dictatorship type algorithms? I mean, it makes you wonder. Then even if they did program them to be evil, dictating algorithms, Couldn't the self-learning software transcend that and at some point become empathetic? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's a hope, but it's a scary thing, man, because anything that comes up as the top search result on Google is necessarily the truth, right? And it says it on Wikipedia too, and that's very scary, man. When you have computers and artificial intelligences telling 99% of the people what is true and correct, does anybody else see a potential for abuse here, right? I mean, it's scary, man. It really is. So let's camp on NASA. The Morgile. Oh, Karen B, I should come and talk to you and Brian Stapley about it sometime. You got my number, girl, don't you? Call me up. Send me a text. I'm back on my phone and my Google accounts. I have all my contacts back, so call me. If you don't have my number, then email me. The Big Wang Theory. Meet Taco Junkie says she was fine though. Who was fine? Oh yeah, the chick from James Bond. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people said they remember her having braces. I don't. I remember her having glasses. But, maybe I was on a different timeline than y'all then. I mean, according to the theory, who knows? Yep. That's right, Storm Rage. Theories, part of the scientific method, but not comply with all the methods, so it's wrong. Spellings are poor examples. I agree. Yeah, like the Berenstein Bears. Yeah. I mean, what a trivial ass thing to go back. Like, if I have a time machine, first thing I'm getting is that damn sports almanac that Marty McFly had, right? Just bet on all the sports games and rake in, kick ass. But to go back and change the spelling of a children's book, come on, man. So even if they're testing it, oh man, that's ridiculous. Buddy Blondie says, time to indulge in a toast. Here's the Morgile and here's to us. Cheers to life. Yeah, cheers to that, man. Salute. Yeah, there are better examples, Karen B. I know. I've seen a lot of them, and I'm not going to say I'm not interested in it, but most of them, it's like I can't say for sure about what happened because I wasn't paying attention to whatever the thing was, and most of the ones that I was paying attention to when they happened, I remember the way that it is now. Like so many of them. So I in any way or beat around the bush about leaving the show in any way. Okay, honestly, I have not spoken with Jaron or Bob since the last Glowbuster show I did with them. Haven't spoken with them. The only thing that I did do was I texted Bob to let him know that some guy was texting me telling him that he was basically doing something against Bob. I don't know what that thing was, but he was basically just talking all kinds of bad things about Bob. He was asking me, did I want to get back at him? I told him no, and he said, well, he's basically trying to include me in some nefarious thing that he was doing against Bob. And so I texted Bob, told him the gist of what was going on, and forwarded Bob the guy's phone number. That's it. That's the only contact I've had with Bob or Darren since the last episode of Glowbusters I did. Now, since then, I've moved 2 states out. So I've moved to one state, South Carolina, and then another state to Kansas, where I'm at now. And in the meantime, I also broke my ribs, which I'm still just kind of getting over. And yeah, so I fired me, and there was no sort of falling out at all. Nothing at all happened. So I don't know. I don't know what happened other than well, while I was locked out of my Google account, I got word that I would not be on the show anymore through listening to the show. And so that's that. So Karen B, you remember No, I'm Your Father as well. Well, you know what? Good on you because, honestly, it makes a lot of sense that we would have heard it wrong because he's sitting there talking to Luke and so this is what I'm saying. So many other so many other resources. Even James Earl Jones himself, when he does like talk shows and stuff, will say, "Luke, I'm your father," right? But them misquoting it is what's stuck in our heads, I think. So we're impressionable in that regard because we've heard that probably 1,000 times when maybe we've only watched the movie 100 times, right? And so yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me, Karen B. Meat Taco, say more about. You think there's an ancient cities under all that ice in Antarctica? Think of the ancient technologies. Yeah, I would not be surprised if there is Antiquitech and look at like the adventures of Admiral Richard Byrd during Operation High Jump back in the 40s, I believe. Even he said, and this is pretty much a quote, he said he flew south of the South Pole from Little America, okay, which is a little wedge of Antarctica according to the ball. So he flew south of the South Pole from Little America and found another landmass larger than the United States of America south of the South Pole. So, in that sort of a context, coming from one of the only people who's actually been there, flying south of the South Pole with impunity, with, free reign under his own volition, comes back and says, yeah, there was warm waters, there was more land, there was a continent larger than the United States, south of the South Pole from Little America. So, in that respect, man, not only do I believe that there's probably remnants of civilizations in Antarctica, I would not be surprised to find that there's more land out beyond Antarctica. And go ahead and look at something like the Iron Republic. I put the audio book on my channel a few years ago. Just search my channel for the Iron Republic. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but it's an account of a guy back in the late 1800s, and like late 1890s, in fact, who basically went south of the South Pole and found an entire civilization called the Iron Republic. It's a really interesting story. There's some pretty compelling information in there, and it's pretty well done. So yeah, check out the Iron Republic. Um, for my thoughts, well, not my thoughts, but whoever I forget the guy's name now, but his thoughts on it and his alleged experience and adventures, right? And I think it very well may be true. The Iron Republic story. It's very, very interesting. Right. So Marco Melbourne says Mandela effect. NASA said they went to the moon. Now they say they can't get there. Yeah, because we've destroyed their technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. What a crock of shit. Yeah, they use now that we've advanced in that technology 60 years. We can't do it anymore because space is fake and the moon is not a ball, a terra firma ball that you can walk around on. You know what I mean? It's absurd for them to to even claim that they went there. I mean, my goodness. Now you've got. Did you guys see the Indian Space Agency? I think it was their moon footage. It looked like something on an Atari or like a Nintendo original, right? Karen B, I disagree. I remember the Monopoly Man did not have a monocle, and I studied that thing very closely. Now, the thing is, though, like, here's the thing, though, and I can understand why you say that. One of his eyes is a little dot, and the other of his eyes is an open circle. And that open circle, if you're not really looking at it, if you're just looking at it from a distance, not paying attention, yeah, it looks like a monocle. But when you get up close to it, man, I remember that 100%. Man, even when I was like 3 and 4 years old, I loved to just play with the money and put the little choo-choo train around the thing, even though I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I looked at that board a lot at my grandparents' house, and yeah, I remember it plain as day. Dude never had a monocle, but again, maybe I'm not attuned to the right timeline or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? It just you know I tend to go with the most logical and least complex sort of Occam's razor answer to things, and it just makes a lot more sense to me that people's memories are way more shit than they think, and they're impressionable. That makes more sense to me than there's time travelers messing around with children's book covers and board games. You know what I mean? I'm the first one to say that Dolly didn't have braces. I know everybody hates me when I say that, but dude, I remember that movie. I've watched that movie so many times, and I always thought she was really hot, even with the glasses. Biophotons and brain parasites, yeah. Video games are just books where you participated in the role of play, movies where you act, and so on. Video games belong to the interactive arts, same as websites. I mean, I've played video games as long as I can remember, dude. I mean, I'm not dogging gamers. Hell, I was a very hardcore gamer for years and years. I still like the occasional video game. Um, but when you start plugging your consciousness into artificial intelligence, super duper realistic looking virtual reality, um, and you have people that are above these sorts of productions with an agenda. To me, that's just a little bit too scary, man. I mean, god dang, I still find myself playing Sonic the Hedgehog music in my mind 25 years after I've ever played Sonic the Hedgehog. So, Sonic the Hedgehog put a worm in my brain when I was a kid, and that worm is still there with that annoying ass Japanese music. Nothing against Japanese music. But, like, God, could you imagine the worms they're going to put in your brains when you're literally, oh my goodness, it's strapped into your face with immersive, hyper realistic 3D graphics? I mean, that's just crazy, man. To me, it's crazy for people to get addicted to that, right? Ban TV and save vaping. Man, I'll tell you, dude, I will not vape. I will, if I'm gonna smoke, I'm gonna smoke. I'm not gonna vape. And for one reason, man, a good buddy of mine, the dude smoked for years. He smoked filtered cigars for years, and one day he decided he was gonna quit the cigars, and he smoked vapes. And within about 2 years of that, he ended up with terrible sinus cancer, and ultimately the radiation and chemo more or less killed him. Okay, and I'm not saying that vapes are necessary. Correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. I get it, but dude, I'm pretty sure that when he switched to vaping from smoking cigars, that's what gave his ass cancer, man. And maybe I'm wrong, but then you've got so many other cases where, like, dude, that's something that I've known a long time. You don't want to sit there and huff in, water water particles into your lungs. That is just breeding ground for infection. Smoke a damn cigarette, man. You know what I mean? I mean, to each his own. I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I've vaped before, and man, that stuff killed my lungs, bro. Killed my lungs. Storm Ray says, "Salud, little brother. You sound more Spanish than me, and I'm from Cuba, but resident in Florida. Florida." No, bro. I'm in Kansas now, man. I've been in Kansas for a couple of months. Did you hear Joe has ligma? I don't know, man. Who's Joe? That is the question. Yeah, Kansas is flat as fuck, man. It's they did some statewide geodetic or whatever geodesic surveying, maybe whichever one, and scientists found that Kansas is flatter than a pancake. Can you believe it? Like, how does that work on a ball? Um, City L. Carty says, we hear about the submerged continent they found in the Midlands Ocean next to the UK. Nope, I haven't heard about that. But yeah, they're finding underground sort of monolithic structures all over the world, underwater. Yeah, Jay Way, I'm not sure, my man. I didn't cover that. Casey Joel says, other than trolling flat Earth content and joining the chat to leave brain dead comments, yeah, I can see your point. Storm Rage again says, not only that, the Morgile at Admiral Byrd diary speaks of other races, yeah, who were aware of the human resets of cataclysms, whatever you want to call it. These races were way beyond our technology, according to Byrd. Yeah, and they also committed him to a nut house for saying the things that he did, and he was talking about Hollow Earth, like subterranean type stuff as well. Yeah, and they had him committed. So, yeah, I mean that sucks, but that's basically what they do because he was one of the boys. I mean, he was a Freemason. He was a high up admiral in the U.S. Navy, and then he comes out, writing reports and putting in his diary about other races and uh, continents larger than the continental United States, south of the South Pole. Like, they had to do something about that, right? So yeah, YouTube is part of the supercomputer, but it can't design a meal by tasting it. Yeah. Yeah, did you ever wonder, what if tasty wheat tasted like tuna fish? Right? Karen B, I thought so for a long time. It's not time travelers. There are physicists who y'all about this phenomenon. It really shifts. Yeah, talk about this phenomenon. Well, objectives, perhaps that's the case. But in terms of accelerating subatomic particles through a tube, first of all, I'm pretty sure that there is no such thing as atoms or subatomic particles, right? So atoms, electrons, neutrons, protons, even the valence electrons, it's all a bunch of theory. Nobody has ever imaged an atom. Nobody has ever imaged an electron. You can't even really define what an electron is without a bunch of hypothetical theory, and yet they're firing those around in tubes and near the speed of light. Okay, sure they are. I just don't believe it. But maybe they are doing something else. And, what do I know, man? Maybe they do have the ability to manipulate time and go back and try to mess us up on Trivial Pursuit, right? Yeah. Casey, you say it kills your lungs at first, but you feel better when you switch. You know what I felt like when I started vaping? I felt like I needed a cigarette. It didn't do it for me, man. You inhale water every shower. Yeah, but it doesn't have chemicals in it like that, dude. You know what I mean? And when you're directly sucking on something into your lungs from a tube that grows bacteria in it, you're just begging for a lung infection when you do that vaping, man. I'm telling you. Vaping is harmless. I grow and smoke my own tobacco. Well, maybe it is harmless, but according to some of the things that I've been seeing coming out about it, I'm glad that I never really got into vaping, man. If you smoke a cig, it drains you and makes you feel tired and weak. Yeah, I mean, I get to each his own, man. I'm not going to tell you don't vape. I'm just going to warn you, dude. Dude, how long has vaping been around? What, 10, 15 years at the most? I don't know. Not that damn long. We don't know what the long-term effects of vaping are yet, right? We don't know. Maybe it's safe for some people, and maybe it will mess up other people really bad. Who knows? So he says, Brandon Check says, man, send me what you smoke, couch. Couch Server says he never went to the North Pole. Are we talking about birds still? I don't know. And apparently he went to both, I think. Yeah, so maybe vaping's not so bad, but I do know that the one dude that I know that started, this was 10 years ago, man. He started vaping and killed him within 2 years. I mean, he wasn't a spring chicken or anything, but he was very healthy and everything before he started vaping. And, it gave him very, very bad cancer in his sinuses, and it ended up killing him. So maybe that's a bad taste in my mouth for vaping, but I'd rather take my chances with cigarettes, where at least I know I'm just getting cancer in my lungs, not in my sinuses. I don't know. It's a very bad argument, I know. Smoking's bad for you, okay? Yeah, so, I mean, doesn't look like too many questions about the subject matter. So I guess I'm going to probably wrap this up as the sun starts to rise here in the bread basket. I appreciate you guys hanging with me again. Check out ZNN's Aesthetic News Network. I'm going to be collaborating with those guys a little bit, and I'll probably end up collaborating with Bob and Darren again. And like I said, nothing's happened. It's just, whatever. They don't want me on the show anymore, I suppose. But to answer that question, but yeah, there's no bad blood. Bob kind of pissed me off a little bit, but I'm over it. Still brothers, still love them. So whatever, man. Right? So I ain't got no room in my heart for hate, dude. I really don't. I mean, it's just not my style, bro. But yeah, I appreciate you guys hanging out, man. It's been almost 2 hours. Listen, if you'd like to support the channel, you can always do so on PayPal or Patreon. I'll put links in the description if you don't already know them. And it was awesome hanging out with you guys. I'm gonna try to do more live streams and videos. Thanks, Nathan, and thanks for all the great comments, topics of conversation. I kind of got off on some tangents that I wasn't planning on, but hey, man, I love chilling with you guys, man. It's always nice. So yeah, peace out, everybody. I'm gonna try to end this stream smoothly, and love y'all. God bless, and I'll see you on the next one. And I'll figure out how to turn this off.